You're listening to the One-on-One Football Podcast, the number one podcast for Aussie rules training, coaching and development tips.
Well, Simo, I'm bloody excited today about this special guest that's joining us for episode 3 of our podcast. His name's Mick Barlow. Had the privilege to work alongside him. The Gold Coast Suns didn't play with him. Obviously, when I was coaching there in the academy, Mick was finished up his last couple of years and got to know the great man. And now he's a formidable part of our coaching platform at One-on-One Football, and he's been one of the most popular coaches in Melbourne. And it's great to have him on board today. So welcome, Mick.
G'day, Rainsy. Harry, good to be on. Yes, those last 2 years at the Gold Coast, played a fair bit of footy with Harry, actually, in the NEFL. So played with him, got the coaching bug off you at the academy trainings. Never thought I'd be a coach. And here I am on Wednesday morning with the whistle on. Just finished up our session with the Simon Black Academy and now coaching my own side down here in Melbourne as well. I'm just going to turn my camera around. One of my greatest achievements, I'm out in the smoking area here at Harry Trott Oval. There's a girl down here, which I'll tilt. She's from Sweden. She came to the academy at the start of the year, couldn't kick, couldn't even hold a football essentially. And she's out there now as another student, kicking over 20, 25 metres just through, and that's probably her worst kick she just did. So big.
Good to see. And
big achievement.
Our great friend on One-on-One Football and a great friend of mine is Simon Black and Blackie's Academy. We'll give that a plug throughout the episode. Blackie's doing some great stuff, and so are you, mate. But we wanted to get you on today and talk to you about a specific topic. That's what we're about, a specialty in coaching. This one's not probably a subject that you can particularly coach and teach, but obviously it's a really good topic to discuss. And it's twofold. It's getting drafted as a mature age player and how you did that, and also consistently gaining a high possession count. So we'll delve into that. Harry, obviously learned a bit off Mick in your time up at the Suns in the NEFL. What were some of the things you sort of got to learn off the great man while you were playing up there?
Yeah, no, I think he's a really good example of not only an ultra professional but also a leader as well. I remember running around the wing and Mick was having 40 touches a game, but despite his own success, he was always willing to teach and help the younger players. Obviously, I was coming through the academy, and I remember, during a stoppage or before the game, whenever it was always willing to hand out advice and really wanted to see the people around him succeed, not only himself. So I think there's going to be lots of gold that the listeners can take from Mick, and he's had a really interesting career, probably taken a different path to most, been super successful, and I think what he's doing now with his coaching is really exciting. And I think we're in for a good one today, fellas.
Looking forward to it. Now, Mick, obviously you touched on the one-on-one stuff that you're doing with us on the platform and also Blackie's Academy, but just give the listeners a quick overview of your life in football. So whether you delve in a bit from your past and where'd your love for the game sort of lead to where you are today?
Yeah, certainly, mate. It started from a young age, and like most kids from the country or regional Victoria, I grew up in Shepparton. It's sport and it's school and it's family, and that's the three things you focus on. I was really well balanced in my life growing up and had tremendous parents as role models to make sure that I was doing my schooling, access to any sport I wanted to play, regardless of time commitment to them. Their selflessness was just amazing, and then, investment in family and friends as well, growing up in the country, just makes you who you are. And most of the time, all three of those, or all the family, friends, and school, for me, was revolving around sport. So on a weekend, you'd go knock around in the park with your mates and kick a footy or play cricket. And at school, I went to Assumption College down the track, and it's a big footballing school and cricket school. And you go there, and yes, you apply yourself to your study, but the most exciting aspect of it is playing footy on the Friday afternoon or playing cricket on the Saturday. So I've just had a passion and love for all sports right from as long as I can remember. And again, parents were great influences in terms of healthy lifestyles and giving me access to any sport I wanted to play. So that was it. I was never much good. I was a better cricketer than I was a footballer growing up, and I wasn't much of a cricketer. And I think eventually through hard work and dedication getting to as many contests as I could on a footy field, and picking up a lot of possessions, I got my opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. And obviously you came through the VFL. You were second in the Liston Trophy one year, and you won the VFL Best Young Player Award as well. What did you do while in your time in the VFL to sort of set you apart from the rest? That obviously led into your AFL career. Was there any extra skills training, any extra speed training, any coaches that helped you sort of, I guess, add layers to your football game?
Yeah, contrary to popular belief, there was a lot of speed training. It just didn't translate into to when I actually played.
Might have to get you down my way.
The effort was there, Mick. The effort was there. That's all we care about.
The effort was there, and I don't think I've picked up a yard since retiring either. So it's a really sight for sore eyes when you're watching me run around.
Oh, join the club, mate. Join the club.
No, fellas, on a serious note, I suppose my opportunity or my avenue into the AFL was probably born out of my second year at country footy. I played in the GV when I was 19, and got a lot of the ball and kind of really developed as a player. And then I was invited down to St Kilda to train. And when I got invited down, I was like, gee whiz, this is a bit daunting, a bit scary, and it's probably going to be borderline embarrassing. But what I picked up there, that was, I think, just the concept of what being a professional athlete looked like in that 6 or 8 weeks that I was there training. From there, it was a passion and a thirst to get drafted. It took another 2 years. And what I found is that I needed an edge, and my edge was just to do, whether it be 5, 10, 20% a week more than what others were doing. And I translated that from my first year at Werribee in 2008. I'd do the training, I'd do the weights program they supplied, but I'd also pick up a swim a week. I had a really good role model playing at Werribee called Dom Gleeson, who was captain at Werribee and just an outstanding person. He used to take me swimming, and we'd go for a K a week in the pool. And that's not something specifically around obviously kicking the ball, handballing the ball, marking the ball. But what I found transitioning from country footy to VFL, I was doing a lot more of that anyway. And I was accessing really high level training. Simon Atkins is one that you asked who was a real role model in that period. It was Simon Atkins, who was fairly hard on me at times, but also just drove me to within an inch of its life to get an opportunity to get drafted. Sometimes, and I look back and I'm really humbled by it, somewhat embarrassed at times as well, that I think there were sometimes elements of his coaching that we would sacrifice elements of the team's opportunity for me to really succeed in different positions. So he played me in all the different positions, made me take the kick-ins. And again, if anyone's watched any of my 141 games, probably not the first choice to take the kick-ins, but he gave me a crack. And that was incredibly humbling. And looking back on it, on reflection, without people like Simon Atkins in my corner, I wouldn't have had the career I did.
We talk about that a lot, and we've discussed that in the first couple of episodes on this podcast about having that support network and the mentors and things like that. So it sounds like you had some great advice along the way, and some great people that helped you. But obviously you got yourself there in the end. I'll talk about that a fair bit in coaching. It's up to you as the individual in the end. It's like, leading a horse to water, but you've actually got to do the work in the end. And so, what was your mindset? You talk about having that edge and things like that, but missing multiple drafts, I assume, didn't play a lot of TAC or NAB League footy, as it's called now, and missed out on potentially a fair few drafts, and you got your chance to play 140 odd games in the end via the VFL. What was your individual sort of mindset? You spoke about the support networks, but how'd you go? Was it frustration, disappointment along the way, or explain to our listeners a bit more about that?
Yeah, certainly a lot of disappointment, and from there comes the frustration, doesn't it? That I would have loved to have got drafted when I trained at St Kilda for 6 or 8 weeks, but am I confident I would have made a career out of it? I think the 2 years in between, when I really sunk the teeth into the VFL career and what that looked like, and actually playing against legitimate VFL footballers and borderline AFL footballers on a weekend, that validated that I could do it to myself, and performing for 2 years really strongly at that level. I was like, yep, I can actually do it. Whereas it might have been just a bit of a, gee, we just throw him in after country footy, and it's you're coming from a fair way back. So it was born out of those 2 years in the lead up to getting drafted, which all those parts you talk about, frustration, disappointment, you're exactly right. My edge, I would like to think is that just commitment to the work and the willingness to do the work, and that it wasn't easy to do because I would have when I made it to an AFL list. You finally get onto an AFL list, you're number 45 and 46 on the list, so it's like, gee whiz, here we go again. And I looked around the change rooms, and you look around and see whose spot you're going to take when you walk in. When you're 21 years old and you're looking at players, Dave Mundy, a young Nat Fyfe's walking in, you're competing for a spot with him. Anthony Morabito was a top draft pick. I was never as skilled or had the X factor or these type of things that these players did. So again, it was just that commitment to the extra work, picking little elements of my craft I could improve. Again, going from VFL to AFL and training full time, you became better. You became a more efficient kick. You were cleaner over the ball because of the hours you put in. I just maintained that attitude from my end that I've got to do 5 to 10% more, whether it is jumping in the ocean every morning mentally or whether it is swimming a kilometre on your day off when you don't feel like it because you look across the locker room and someone's getting a massage. But that was my point of difference. I'm very proud of, I think, in terms of getting the level out of myself I did, because it was largely mental. And eventually, you for a player like me, your deficiencies are going to catch up with you, and the younger players are going to come in and be those players that probably look at you in the locker room and say, he's the one I'm gunning for, and they got me in the end, fellas, but they took their time getting me.
Absolutely. So obviously joining Fremantle as a mature age player, you would have had a fair few draftees coming in that same year that would have been 2-3 years younger than yourself. Did you find that coming into the AFL system, mature age, obviously it helped from that you've already played a high level with senior footballers, but from a social point of view, did you find it easier to slot into the list, into I guess the locker room with the other older players than some of the draftees?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. The names I got drafted with, it was a great group. Like Morabito played 22 games that first year. Nat Fyfe has become a 2-time Brownlow medalist. Alex Silvani was another mature ager from the VFL, so we had a real connection coming from Victoria. To cut our teeth at AFL level, and he played, he was a regular player from day dot like myself with that group. And again, it's that sliding doors type of moment where you count your lucky stars. And yes, I had disappointments and setbacks along the way, but going to Fremantle, they'd been a list that had been rejuvenating, I think, for 2 years or 3 years, and that was essentially the last year of their revamp. So I think there'd been 36 new players coming over 3 years. And we went from 36 new players that year to the finals. And when that happens in the AFL landscape, you're going to get opportunity as a younger player or a player fresh on the list. And then it's just about the mindset that we talked about, having that mindset that it's not going to be given to you. There's opportunity there, and you've just got to go grab it. So that was a brilliant start to my career in terms of the club and the environment in Fremantle. It's the best place in the world, Perth and Fremantle. Perth City, not so much, but Fremantle. I fell in love with the place, had 7 years there and still have an amazing affinity with the joint. I would never rule out going back there because of those relationships you make, and the environment you surround yourself with. And I suppose back to your question, the core group was 21, 22 years of age when I got there, and that was how old I was. And those older players just provided a platform and an environment for everyone to feel comfortable, and that was Sandilands, Pavlich, Dave Mundy, Luke McFarlane.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think the draft was last week, or and you see a lot of young guys sort of getting picked up, and they come straight through the talent pathways, and you see them going to an AFL list at 18, and occasionally you get the stories that they do struggle just with that transition, being the big dog in under 18s football or whatever, junior football, and then struggle to sort of transition. So clearly that, I think it's a really good message for those guys that do miss out. And in contrary to you do see those mature age players. I think I saw a couple of players from South Adelaide get picked up at being sort of cutting their teeth into their apprenticeship down there, and they do get their opportunity. So clearly it did help. And you burst onto the scene in Freo in your first year, 2010. 33 possessions and 2 goals. I think Champion Data have got it, if I've got my stats right. They've got it as the best debut in terms of disposals
numbers,
and ranking
aesthetically
points.
It wasn't,
numbers.
Aesthetically, it wasn't super.
Well, you know what, mate? You got to take these. You got to take these little wins. And you played 13 games in your first year, AFLPA best first year player, and averaging at 27.8 possessions. I've done my research, but you also broke your legs severely and missed the last 8 games of the season. With these highs and lows in one season, I mean, that must have been a huge roller coaster year for you.
Yeah.
How do you reflect on that all?
Yeah, it was. And I just had one more point to make on our last discussion. And you would relate to this really strongly, and you wouldn't take it to heart at all. But you were a player coming through, weren't you, that was always linked to Richmond through the father-son, and the opportunity was going to come. There's so many examples like that. And this year with the coronavirus, there would have been players this year that didn't play football that were a Monty essentially to get drafted at the start of the year. And that can burn players out because they can get to 18 years old and they feel like their hopes and dreams are done. And they're 18 years old. When I was 18 years old, I didn't know my left from my right. And, your life was nowhere near getting started. So there's so many examples out there. Your career, you'd be, and rightfully so, very proud of your career, 3 clubs, and made a niche, found your niche and fulfilled the responsibility in that space. So for those guys that might be listening at 18 years of age or 19 that missed out, go play the highest level of footy you can, give yourself the best opportunity and aim to dominate it. Validate that you can do it, and then launchpad yourself into what's next. What will be, will be. If it comes off, it comes off. If not, at least you've dared to dream, I suppose, is my example on that.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, and probably sort of sticking to on that question. We'll get back to the beautiful stats that I pulled out before. But in that notion of, and someone said it the other day, people now, and kids have really got to listen to this one. Are you playing to get drafted, or are you playing because you love football? We essentially, I've seen a lot through the pathway stuff. They miss the draft, and then they go back and might have a year or two at local or state league football, and then they give up because they didn't get drafted. They're playing to get drafted, where it sounds like you obviously clearly want to get drafted, but you played, went back and played country football, and you went back through the hard ways, and because you obviously had a clear sting in your system or inside of it, that you still love the game. So it is an important sort of point, that.
Yeah, and I've got a great quote my girlfriend gave to me only last week. Comparison is the thief of joy. So never compare yourself, and it's really hard for those guys that are in the hit zone of getting drafted in that period. And Harry has lived this as well, seeing some of his academy proteges, Butterick, go through and get drafted, and Harry misses out on an opportunity. But you've got to be happy doing what you're doing. I'm as fulfilled now, and this is probably more a mindfulness or purpose kind of purpose podcast content. Is I'm more fulfilled now than I was, especially the last half of my career. Just because I think when you're in the cut and thrust of an AFL career, you're comparing yourself to why haven't I got that house? Why aren't I getting a game every week? Or why am I always getting sore? Whereas now it's the weight comes off, and my investment is in others getting better. It's in my own career in terms of the coaching, media, all the other stuff I'm liking to do. And I've learnt now not to compare myself or, the earning capacity goes down, but the enjoyment and the fulfillment somewhat goes up. And I wish I had found a better balance in the last half of my AFL career, just to be happy with where I was at, which Harry spoke about earlier. At times when I was playing NEFL, I got tremendous joy and fulfillment out of playing with kids that were wet behind the ears. Pissed me off a little bit at times, Rangey, they did, but for the most part, they were great to work with.
I think you touched on a really good point there, Mick. We actually talked about it a little bit on the last podcast, but obviously footy is important, and if you're trying to get drafted, that's obviously a forefront of mind. But just acknowledging that whether you get drafted, whether you don't get drafted, how long your career goes for, you'll still be happy. You'll still find something. And I think you brought up my career, and I think something I wish I could have said to myself to take the pressure off, as you mentioned, was don't worry if you get drafted. You'll still be happy. You'll still find that fulfillment. I think if I'd learned that, or if anyone coming through sort of their under 18s can sort of accept that, then it comes back to, oh, now I'm playing footy because I enjoy it, not because I'm comparing or because I want to get drafted necessarily. I think finding ways to take the pressure off and sort of having confidence that what happens, and if you're putting your head down, doing a little bit extra than everyone else is, then you're giving yourself the best shot. Is that sort of something that you found along the way?
No, absolutely. Some of the best examples of transitions out of AFL that I've seen and people that I'm close with are the ones that scrapped and clawed on 1 year deals. A bloke that's still in the system, Matt DeBoer, who's had a great career. He's 200 games. But what I really admire him for is he's had a commitment to his off-field and his work-life balance the whole way through. He actually postponed his draft year so he could do his first year of uni. And he was no lay down was there to get drafted. So I think that's a really good case study for someone to sit back and think, what's actually really important in my life? I love football and I want to be an AFL footballer, but will it compromise actually what I want to prolong once I'm 30 years old and finish? And Matt with great self-awareness says he didn't believe he was going to last much longer than 21, 22. But due to that attitude and that incredible focus on both on and off the field, he's managed to be an incredible leader across 2 football clubs and 200 games and chalk out. I think his first 2-year contract came like essentially last year when he was 29. So that's a great example, Harry, for someone that, yes, he's had a great AFL career, but his transition, like he'll be in the top 1% of AFL players that come out of the game and make a really good cut and thrust of it in the business world, just due to that translatable element of on-field and within an elite environment to, okay, what's next?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's all about balance, isn't it? And understanding that you're not an athlete, you're a person first and foremost. And if you can get yourself right off the field, it's obviously gonna help with what you can do on field. So Mick, we want to dig a little bit into your career.
Are we going to go back to the stats?
Well, yes, this is that's a bit of a prelude to the stats. Harry's got the next question, and it's based on our topic and our niche that we want to obviously.
We better dig into that.
Get the message out there for a lot of young footballers and coaches.
Yeah,
100%. We got some stats in there. Don't worry. So Mick, we know you obviously had an incredible ability to find the footy. You're currently ranked 26th on the all-time average possessions per game for a player, I believe, if our research is correct. And some of the players that are above you in the top 20 are Tom Mitchell, Scott Pendlebury, Dane Swan, Diesel Williams. So obviously quite a good crowd to be.
I guarantee you they were never the sub 3 or 4 times in their career or subbed out. So I wish I could include that in the statistics, maybe with a little asterisk.
Absolutely. And obviously that ability to find the ball and do it consistently as well is something we don't see often. And when we do, it's obviously it demands a lot of respect. And I'd be interested to find out how did you go about developing that side of your game? Was it a mentality before the game, or did you do specific work on it prior to the games in training?
Yeah, I think it was something that always came naturally. It's a really hard thing to coach is, I suppose, game IQ and ability to follow the ball. And there's a really fine balance between going to a contest and getting caught in no man's land as well, especially at the top level. And I admittedly got caught out a lot in that at my Freo days towards the back end of my career there, going to the contest when it might have been better to hold your width and support defensively. So it's a really tricky one to coach in terms of when to go to the ball and when to protect and allow some balance on the outside. So my philosophy was always, if I could feel like I could get to a contest and impact it, whether that be a front and square, or if it was a 2-on-2 and I would think, okay, I can get there and they can buy some time, and if we can win this 2-on-2, I become the outnumbered 3-on-2. A lot of it is just summing up, I suppose, the equations of the game. Can I influence the contest? No. Well, now I've got to hold some balance. Can I influence the contest? Yes. So I'm going to go over and support. And then the next step for me was what makes it easiest for a player under pressure, especially in contests. I talk about the 2-on-2. how do I make it easiest for him to get me the ball? Is it look him in the face and get to his chest, his or her chest, or is it, 15 metres on the fly? No, it's not. It's certainly just going over, supporting, being that outnumber, and then you've got the ball and you can create and assist from there. So a lot of I suppose it's Tom Mitchell, you see it at nauseum. He's an accumulator, and I was an accumulator. We're not players that are going to get on the fly and have these moments where we pierce someone inside forward 50, maybe once every 4 or 5 weeks, but it's getting to the contest, continually summing up the game as you go to give yourself the opportunity to get the football. The other one would be, for mine, I had to build this into my psyche due to my perceived lack of leg speed, which was when the ball left contest, yes, you can be quick by feet and quick on foot, or you can be quick by mind. So if you can see the ball 5 metres away from you, but the opposition clearly have it and the bloke's going to kick it, you start going. Do your work early, and you can pick up 5 or 10 metres there. And if it is a Silrioli or a really fleet-of-foot player that just ball watches just for that little second or two, at least you're goal side and you can give yourself an opportunity to beat them back to the contest. So continually analysing the game, continually staying on the move, and getting to as many contests within reason as you can.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there any game day tricks or tips or anything like that you recommend? Sounds like we covered a fair bit of it, and I talk a lot about that in my coaching to especially a lot of kids that are getting that feedback that aren't finding a lot of the footy. You might get some really good athletes or some guys that show a lot of promise, especially in the talent space. So they don't necessarily need to get drafted or they get drafted if they're having 30 possessions, more so those standout characteristics. I want to ask you, coming through sort of junior footy or whatever, were you a high possession winner?
Yeah, I was.
Particular, always had that knack.
Yeah, I think probably when I got to school, when I kind of grew up and became, I think Rainsy and Harry, probably embarrassingly, I became a high possession getter when they started to take stats. So I thought, this might be my point of difference. I'm a bit slow and I can't kick, and I'm a bit soft and I'm a bit light. But they started to do pen the stats at school at Assumption, and I only played 2 or 3 games, I think, when I was in year 11 in the first 18. And they used to put the stats on the board on a Monday morning. And I did know that was kind of my bread and butter, getting the ball. And I thought, if I can kind of turn heads here and everyone walks up to the sports board on Monday and I've had 25 possessions in the only game I played a full game, people will look around and think, geez, that's more than our best players are getting. So but I didn't notice him. And I think from there it was just, again, my modus operandi was going to the ball, going to the contest, supporting outnumber, and getting my possessions that way. As the police or the ambulance have just gone past someone's house.
Yeah,
that'd be in the northern parts of Melbourne, I think.
No, back streets of southern part of the Gold Coast, mate.
Oh,
so there's a bit going on.
Yeah. No, and one more to pinch off you around that getting the ball. I spoke a lot about early in this podcast around that extra 5 to 10% you do during the week. And mine was always swimming or something cardio based that wasn't pounding yourself on a running track. But I think that plays a huge benefit. If you can have a capacity to do 5-10% more, and I spoke to this about the academy kids here today after our training session around, if you do a 2K time trial and you're just in the pack, you're an 8-minute 2K or a 7-minute 30 2K, and you're in the pack, then you're probably, like, realistically, if you haven't got much of a point of difference, you'll be in the pack when you go out and play. You'll be a 15 possession player. But if you can become a 6-minute 30 2K, you're going to become, not great at maths, but say that's a 20-25% improvement on your 7:30 or 8-minute. You should expect to get 25% more of the ball. So you become a 20 possession player because you're at 25. Your capacity is 25 more physically when you're out there. So that's a little bit of my stuff. I was always a 2K time trialer or a 3K time trialer that just went hard and just tried to run as fast as I could. Again, the comparison is the thief of joy. Don't run a time to think, I'm running against the clock here. I'm running to do these splits. Rainsy did this. Harry was really good as well. I've seen a couple around Metricon Stadium there. Just go out and try and win it. And if they catch you, at least you're giving yourself a chance. So, I think that's a little one I wanted to pinch just because it was really relevant to a discussion I had today around if players are sitting there thinking, how do I become a 20 possession player a game, but I'm running an 8-minute 2K, it's that horse to water discussion, isn't it? You got to put in the work. You got to put in the work and become capable of covering the ground and going till the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'll admit that you weren't the fastest player going around, but your work capacity was huge. And with a style of game that sort of relied on getting to contests, I think having a really strong base to build on is really important. And something that's been a bit of a theme so far in the first 3 episodes of this podcast is how you spend your fuel tickets. We all know that, and you touched on it there, that if you want to make change, if you want to improve your football, you're going to have to do work that other people aren't. So let's say there's some footballers out there that need to work on their endurance, their work capacity. They can't go running a 2K every day, especially with training. We need to make sure that we're not overloading. Something that I'm quite passionate about is making sure that whatever you're doing, you're getting the best return, but it's not then negatively affecting your football training. Were there any other, you mentioned swimming, were there any other, let's say low impact, but sort of really high reward extras that you used to do or you encourage your footballers to do at the moment?
Yeah, no, great call. And I think the one-on-one platform is doing a brilliant job in terms of the niche market. And Harry, you do some great stuff in the biomechanics, sports science space. Range, you've brought in the mindfulness element, the dietitian advice and the camps that are coming up, masterclass type stuff. So a real niche market within our one-on-one platform to I suppose tap into athletes that might need that extra 10% in terms of sports science because they haven't been associated with a NAB league or a Colt side in the Sandford, Waffle or academies in Brisbane or Queensland. So how do you find that it's investing in your own career from a young age? And someone just kicked it onto the cricket pitch. I hate that when they do that. Kicked it onto the cricket pitch. So invest in your own career, and the guys that are listening out there, and guys and girls that are thinking, how can I become that increased player? It's getting advice. Information is power. Knowledge on things is going to set you apart from others. So mine was always swimming, mate, from physical side. I just like being in shape, to be honest, as much as I could. And I probably felt, this is another elevated discussion around that high performing environment in the AFL, skin folds. I reckon if I didn't do that extra swim a week, I did like to have an ice cream or two, during the week. So my philosophy was, I'm not going to sacrifice the ice cream. I'll do a little bit more work to make sure, and within reason, to give myself an edge and keep myself in professional athlete condition. So my advice is to guys and girls that are out there at that age, just get the information, get the knowledge, and then you can make informed decisions. Don't, everything that comes at you, don't stack it in and take it as gospel. Take little bits and pieces that you think's apparent. Us as coaches, we're never 100% right. Very, very fallible. We'd like to think we're probably 80%, 90% wise and right, but we are very fallible as well. So take the information. Some things that resonate with me won't resonate with 3 or 4 that are out there at the moment. And that is fine. And that's the discussion about, okay, then have we got another person we can access and get some discussion points around nutrition or whatever it might be. So get as much information as you can and make really good informed decisions. Discuss that information with people you really trust.
No, good point. Excellent point. And I think on that topic of putting the ingredients in to be able to then go and perform and win that high possession tally or in each game be consistently a high possession ball winner. It has its ups and downs, obviously, or its challenges. So you're going to win a lot of the footy, and then that draws a lot of attention. So one of my topics, which I'm a fair expert in, I would have thought, is tagging. And actually, Harry, before we did these notes, was asking me, did I ever tag Michael? And I said, well, believe it or not, listeners, I've slowed down the last couple of years in my career, but early on, I used to play on more the outside guys with a lot of speed, and I used to play on Stephen Hill a bit. He used to give me a few nightmares at the way he used to prance and run up and down Subiaco.
Change of direction.
Well, elite runner, and Tom Scully was one of the other ones I used to really, back myself in with my sort of that speed endurance stuff, but they were really tough opponents. So I said, unfortunately, get to play on Mick, and a credit to Mick, who's a bit stronger, a bit more physical for me inside, and probably would have, been a bit more of a bull. So talk about the tagging side. Obviously you did get tagged throughout your career, and give some of the guys that are coming through, guys and girls these days, and coaches that are coaching people that are struggling with the tag. Talk about a bit of the sort of tagging days and sort of how you dealt with that when you were getting a bit of attention.
Yeah, so I didn't get a huge amount. I think the most eye-opening situation in my career was my third and fourth game. I literally reckon I got tagged maybe 3-4 times in my career. But the first one was Cameron Ling. And the second one was Brett Kirk. So two of the best. Two of the best. Brainsy, you'd have them pinned up in your bedroom wall even when you were playing for Richmond, Brisbane, and the Gold Coast.
When I was playing for those 1 year deals, mate, I think I did.
Yeah. So the third game was Ling, and as a young player, like my advice to anyone that kind of comes on and gets some attention that really early phase of their career would be, don't change what you've done to actually be the player that has acknowledged that tag. Well, like, it was an eye-opening moment for me. It was like there was a bit of talk. You probably get tagged this week. You know, all this, a bit of planning, and my planning wasn't essentially about just deep breath and go out and play like you've been playing. Yeah, there's going to be moments where it's probably going to not go your way. I tried to become a different player, especially those weeks. I tried to be that outside player and run to different angles, and the that they're super at their craft, so they don't mind that when a player that is naturally good at going to the ball and getting the ball in contest is trying to rely on getting the ball 4 or 5 times a quarter on the outside. Then they would have been licking their lips. So that's what I learned along the way, that how to approach a tag would be do what tricks don't usually get it done. There might be one in every 10 games where a tag goes out and says, I'm going to do this, and this, and it comes off. So that's a little bit of advice, I think, for the tag. But I probably became more recognised as a tag at the later parts of my career. I think last few games at Freo, I tagged. And gee whiz, you have some sleepless nights, Rainsy, don't you? You earn your money when you walk out there and you're lined up against Robbie Gray. I think it was David Zaharakis, Daniel Rich, Joel Selwood when I went to the Gold Coast, tagged him. You start to think, this is, and it's also tagging. So much of it's a mental thing, isn't it? It's okay, got to stay in the contest. They're going to have their moments. They're going to have a moment where they just make you look silly. Daniel Rich kicks one from 60 in the first 2 minutes of the game, and you've got to be able to screw your head on and say, okay, that's happened. There's not much I could have done about that, but what I can influence is the next contest. So that some of the most fulfilling games and memorable games for mine were tagging. It's one of those things. You're pitched out there, and Rains, you'd be, as you said, a real expert in discussing it. Pitched out there against the best. And they're the games you look back on at the end of your career and you're like, it was actually a privilege and an honour to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I guess if your role is to tag, you're going to be exposed to some of the great players of the game, some of the really good, really elite ball winners. When you mentioned Joel Selwood and a few other names there, was there anything? I guess something I'm quite interested in is the difference between winning the ball on the inside and the outside. And when you're getting tagged, or when you were tagging someone, did you notice that people could sort of change tact a little bit and say, well, I might not be able to win the footy outside as much if I've got a tag running around, so I'm going to shift my game to the inside. I don't think many players have the ability to change like that. Was there anyone that you sort of came across that really could win the footy inside and outside just as good?
Yeah, Robbie Gray was one. That was probably the best ever game I played, so I'll give myself an acknowledgement there. But you watch the tape leading into that game, because he was playing in the midfield at the time, but kicking 4 goals a game. You're like, he's untagged because he's so good in traffic. Then he'll get you out. Yep. You can't find him. He's gone. Like you snooze for a millisecond, and you're like, where's he pissed off to? So it's those type of players that are the hardest, that have the versatility to take you wherever you want on the field. My take on things in terms of that inside versus outside is find your craft and become a master at it. Simon Black is absolutely terrific at coaching this stuff. Is that inside stuff? Okay, how do I position myself at a stoppage 80% of the time to have a better position than my opponent. There's going to be that 10, 20% of the time that, circumstances, ball bounces over there, they get to the ball first. But how do you position yourself? And it's, is it body work for bigger players? It's body work, pushing and owning a space on the inside. Is it reading the flight of the boundary zone? It's a short boundary zone, so you flip behind them and push them under so they have no room to work in, and then you own the outside. So it's like that discussion we had at the start about getting to as many contests as you can. It's making really quick decisions when the ball's either up at a stoppage or coming in, that you're reading the flight, you can see both ruckman and ball to make really informed decisions. And again, if you make yourself really proficient in that 8 out of 10 times, you're going to put yourself in a position, the percentage-wise is going to add up, that you're going to be in a position more often than your opponent to get access to that ball. So that's a little bit, me being a bigger body player, would like to engage in body contact with opponent. When I really did have some trouble with centre square bounce, especially because it's a bit like a deserted island in there, centre square bounce, when it was a Rioli, Puopolo, and a Sam Mitchell who's really good with his feet, because you're trying to find their body, and it's a little bit of a game of chess. Okay, I want to find his body, but I want them to come to me. So Rioli looks at me, I'm not going anywhere near. I'm going to stand 5 metres off the circle, so I crib out a bit. He keeps going back. What's that point that you stop and say, I'm just going to have to stay close enough to the contest here, and back the ruckman to keep it in nice and close. So many elements of stoppage and midfield craft that is around, and these are discussions, again, the one-on-one platform can have where there can be our Zoom meetings around, okay, let's watch some vision. Let's watch some vision versus Rioli versus Barlow.
Yep.
What would Rioli want here? And you ask the kids or the young athletes, and they're like, Rioli wants to be on the move, to use his agility. What does Barlow want? If Barlow gets in and wrestle with Rioli, thanks for coming. That's the only time I'll ever beat him. Push him off, come to the ball, handball it out to our outside runners. So there's an hour discussion in that discussion around stoppages and craft and techniques to get you access to the ball in itself.
No, it's gold, and there's a lot of. I love that point about knowing your strengths, and I talk about it a lot in my coaching, and as a player too, just giving me memories of centre bounce stoppages, or boundary throw-ins or whatever in forward 50 or your defensive 50, and trying to navigate yourself around that, and obviously the purpose, trying to stop someone, or is it actually trying to win the football, which we've covered a lot on you today, how you were able to win a lot of that possession. Now, you'd mentioned before about the junior footy days and having the stats up, and that's what really brought the passion out about your leather poisoning at times. Did you ever lose count? Did you, or were you sort of, obviously when you're Freo days, obviously out on your app or your phone after the game, were you first to check it, or were there a few stories around the locker rooms? Because I've got a few stories around Tom Rockcliffe doing that at Brisbane.
Yeah, Tom
straight
Rockcliffe
on his phone after the ground.
He's called the pig, isn't he? He would walk off with 80 point loss, but if he's had 45, he always had that look. He always had that look on his face after a game, and you'd always see the possessions on board. It'd be like Tom Rockcliffe 45, but you beat them by 10 goals, and he'd be walking around with that hip wobble and just looking up at the screen, and he's like looking really just disgruntled and dishevelled. But I know in his head he's like, well, I did my role. I'm 45. So he's a very, very big victim for that exact point. And I would be lying if on the odd occasion I didn't think I'd had an okay game and didn't go in and check. More so, I suppose, if you had a good game at AFL level, you'd be able to see it. Neefel and Harry, I think you played the game, the infamous game at the SCG, Sydney Swans versus Gold Coast Reserves. I think about 6 players on the ground on that day had 40 plus. And I managed to raise the bat over to the members' pavilion and have the 50. And we actually beat the Swans, and we weren't going overly well at that stage, both Neefel and seniors at the Gold Coast. But we both had a win on the day. It was a good day for the club. I packed up my half century and got back on the bird to Gold Coast Airport.
We've thrown plenty of stats at you today. Was that your highest possession game?
I would imagine. I might have had more in a Golden Valley footy game.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's AFL. I had 43 once, and that was my game. I tagged Robbie Gray, and I'll go to my grave just with a big smile on my face with that one. The second last game I think I ever played for Freo. So I think that's going to be hard to top. A guy, Jordan Dawson, who's now a very, very good player for Sydney, had 24 tackles or something that day. So the forwards and the backs, Harry would have come off with about 5 because the forwards and the backs it was just a midfield slogfest and everyone was just handballing to each other.
Yeah, that was a great day, that one. Awesome day for the club. Best one I've been involved in, for sure.
Yeah.
So with that, mate, it's obviously, we had a bit of a laugh about being able to find the ball. And as we sort of, I suppose, summarise the topic around winning the football and gaining consistently high numbers and possessions, you've thrown a lot of things up today, which is it's absolutely gold around sort of, as you said, I love that theory before about facing their chest and getting to the contest, outworking. Is it a 2v1? Is it a 3v4? Reacting mentally before over physical aspects that people have got over you. If you want to sort of summarise for our listeners today around, 2 or 3 important things to teach that aspect of the game. As we said, it's hard to teach, but if there's 2 or 3 things.
Yeah, I think if they're at home jotting down some notes and looking at their own game, identify what you do really well. What's your weapon? What's your your one wood or your A grade trait? Mine would have been stoppage, cleanliness, and clean hands, and distributing to outside users. So that's one I sit down and say, I've got to maintain that at a really, really good level to be the player I am. So Matt Prittis won a Brownlow doing it. Sam Mitchell was another in tight. He had a lot of other tricks, but clean, feed. Nat Fyfe does it at stoppage. So understand what is your 1 to 2 points of difference. It might be a left foot kick that just is a brilliant kick. Don't just take advantage of that and think I'm a great kick. I don't need to train it. You do need to top up your training with your real traits that are in the positive. Again, find your edge, whether it be mental, physical, or skill acquisition against the field. So mine was, I would assume I would describe it as a mental, but it was at the same time physical. The physical output of getting a 1 kilometre swim in wasn't huge for me. It might have been 0.2%, but what it was mentally, I knew I'd done that. And I always felt, for whatever reason, if I hadn't done it that week, shoulder injury or whatever it was, I would feel mentally just that slight bit off and a little bit anxious about what was coming ahead. My last one would be just, information and knowledge. The more you can get and be really critical with it in your own summation, it is going to benefit you amazingly. Ask questions of your coaches, challenge them at times. When you see, something in a different capacity, I would also advise challenge them in individual opportunities. If it's a group meeting and you see something that you're not 100% sure on, but you might have a varying opinion, come up to them afterwards and thrash it out. And I'd 99.9% of the coaches you deal with are always very receptive to that type of feedback. So, probably that, guys. It's finding your one wood, do it well. Again, find an edge. What's your edge? Is it swimming? Is it mindfulness? And then the third one is, if you're really passionate about it, absorb information, get to understand it a lot better.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's some awesome little takeaways for everyone listening. Mick, just to wrap us up, you've been a part of the one-on-one coaching platform for around 2 years now, and you're one of the most popular coaches across Melbourne. What can footballers that book a session with you expect? And why do you recommend one-on-one football as a resource for footballers taking control of their own careers?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 60-minute session, you're going to get an amazing amount of touch and access. 60 minutes is just absolute gold in a one-on-one environment. I suppose from my point of view, I didn't mention much about kicking or I suppose the skill side of things in my own game, but what I've become really, really good, I feel, at transitioning out of the game is teaching that and coaching that. And I've got to give a big shout out to Mark Williams, who coached me at Werribee, and he's part of the one-on-one platform. He coaches kicking to within an inch of its life, and me actually being underneath him as an assistant coach and a player, now I'm in a position to coach kicking. Whereas I probably came out of the AFL and was a bit hesitant to give advice on how to kick. I became a better kick when I left the AFL system due to touching the ball more and kicking the football more, which is quite remarkable, seeing that I had an AFL career. So that's an element of regret in my career, that why didn't I go and kick the ball every day 100 times? Why didn't I just continuity of kicking? So what I really focus on in my sessions is the basics: the kicking, the handball, the ground ball, and the marking. Again, we can have discussions around thought processes, and the more sessions you do, you can have sit downs and discussions around, okay, what are you thinking here? What's on your mind here? What should your next thought process be? But I think a brilliant aspect of the one-on-one platform is we do stuff that AFL players don't invest enough time in themselves, and that's the pure skills of the game and doing the skill.
No, it's amazing, mate. It's obviously a privilege to have you on board, and I know some of the the families and footballers down there in Melbourne have absolutely loved your sessions, and again, once you build that relationship with someone, you've got the trust, and there's that skill component, but then also the mental side too. That we've tapped into nearly an hour of this podcast or 50 minutes, and you can tap into this information where you can actually do that in a one-on-one environment. And I think the likes of Chocos and these type of coaches will look to get on board, and the podcast have got these elements of gold, and you've helped the viewers or the listeners today understand a couple of those little gold moments in football and what are those key topics and fundamentals that we talk about. But you're doing amazing stuff. I'll give a shout out to my great mate Blackie with his academy down there. So jump on board the Simon Black Academy if you're sort of looking to get a bit of an education, and also some footy coaching weekly daily, isn't it, Mick? 3 or 4 days a week.
So academies in Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, and Brisbane. And Monday to Thursday, and you get a diploma in sports management on the other end of it, and go into a bachelor program if that's the pathway you want to take. So it's a great program, and really enjoying doing it on a daily basis.
Good stuff, mate, and a pleasure to have you on board today. Looking forward to seeing how your coaching career goes, and coaching locally this year.
Yes, Yarraville 7, WRFL. So first year with the whistle on, and looking to play a few games. Well, play most of the games, I would hope, touch wood, for them as well. So, yeah, it's coaching. As I said, it wasn't a pathway I thought I was at all interested in until that, I suppose, competitive nature of on-field is taken away, and it's just such a great sport to be involved in. That involving yourself with people and highly motivated people, there's nothing more fulfilling and stimulating.
All right, that brings us to the end of the podcast, guys. Thanks so much for listening to the One-on-One Football Podcast. If you got something out of today's episode, we'd love to have you leave a review for us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to stay updated on future episodes, special guests, and more, please feel free to subscribe to the show on your chosen platform. Once again, thanks, Mick, for being our third guest, episode number 3. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks Mick. Thanks, Randy.